We're continuing our conversation about racism. I want to acknowledge that as a white woman living in North America, I have not experienced racism. I have experienced discrimination, but that is not the same as racism, the systemic and continual oppression of others. It's easy for us, as we have said, to look across the border and say, phew, at least it's not our problem. But as I said earlier, I have friends in Vancouver and in Red Deer who are speaking of the racism and the problems that they are experiencing, even here in Canada during this time of COVID and prior to that. And the reality is that our country, just like America, was founded on this idea of colonization, of the exploitation, the discovery of lands that were already inhabited, this idea of subduing and suppressing and controlling others so that people could have the goods, the reputation, the money that they desired. This is stealing, and it is not right. Even in our denomination, we have talked about the doctrine of discovery and how we need to reject it, and how this continuing narrative of colonization has influenced our stories as North Americans. It influences our politics, our religion, our economics, the ways that we interact with others. This idea that we can subdue and suppress others in order to get what we want is still part of our understanding of the world and needs to be checked. Needs to have a new story that we are told, which is what the story of the Bible is trying to do, but that we don't always listen to. But I want to be clear that it, like this thing is not just something that's out there, but the seedlings of racism begin in our own hearts. And this is where I recognize that as a white woman, I have work to do as well. You will remember perhaps that in Matthew, Jesus says, "You have heard it said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother and sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult your brother or sister, you will be liable to the council." This is what our Heidelberg Catechism gets at, that these roots of murder and racism begin in our own hearts. In the commandment, in the Heidelberg Catechism, in the commandment referring to the sixth commandment, you shall not kill, it says this: "I am not to belittle, insult, hate, or kill my neighbor, not by my thoughts, by my words, by my look, or my gestures, and certainly not by my actual deeds. And I am not to be party to this in others, rather I am to put away all desire for revenge." By forbidding murder, God teaches us that he hates the root of murder: envy, hatred, anger, vindictiveness. In God's sight, all such are murder. By condemning envy, hatred, and anger, God tells us to love our neighbors as ourselves, to be patient, peace-loving, gentle, merciful, and friendly to them, to protect them from harm as much as we can, and to do good even to our enemies. When I read these things, I recognize that I too have work to do, to recognize in myself where my words and my gestures and my thoughts, maybe even my actual deeds, what I do and what I leave undone, need to be put into context. Am I being kind? Am I being patient? Am I hating someone? Am I holding something against somebody that I should be letting go? And when we begin to look at ourselves and to recognize this work that needs to be done, we begin to root out some of the seedlings that lead to racism. And I think that this is really important. This is a hard reality because it cuts close to home. It means that we have to recognize our own bias. It means we have to recognize our own privilege. It means we have to recognize the ways in which we may be, with or without our knowledge, continuing these stories of colonization, continuing the story of distrust towards our neighbor, rather than living in the light of Christ and the work of the Holy Spirit in our world and in our churches. There is a meme that's going around the internet that says, if it doesn't change in our own hearts and in our own homes, it won't change. Nothing will change in the world. And I think that this is a true Christian principle that we must look within, hold ourselves up in the light of Christ, and do the work there, practice it in our homes and in our communities so that that change can overflow into the world. And so I invite you to look within, to hold yourself up against the light of Christ, and to make the changes and to find the healing that we need to do in our own hearts so that we can engage with our brothers and sisters well. I have committed this year at the beginning of 2020 to read more authors of color who are not white and who do not have the same experiences as I do. And maybe that's something worth considering. So, I encourage you to think about those sorts of things. Grace and peace.